That WhatsApp number is 1-246-548-0773, and it will be displayed throughout this program. Before we go into today's discussion, please remember to tune into your local government for information and instructions, and please follow them as best as you can, as long as it doesn't come into conflict with God's law. According to 1 Peter chapter 2, verses 13 to 17, and I'm going to quote from the New International Version. It says, "Submit yourselves for the Lord's sake to every human authority, whether to the emperor as the supreme authority, or to the governors who are sent by him to punish those who do wrong, and to commend those who do right. For it is God's will that by doing good you shall silence the ignorant talk of foolish people. Live as free people, but do not use your freedom as a cover for evil. Live as God's slaves. Show proper respect to everyone. Love the family of believers. Fear God. Honor the emperor." My co-host and brother in arms for God's salvation, Brother Ward, will not be joining us today on this episode of Straight Talk 2020. Wherever you are, my brother, and whatever you're doing, I pray God's blessing on you and your family. I would like to take this opportunity as well to thank everyone who contributes to Straight Talk 2020 and making it possible. It is if you or a viewer have an idea for a program or wish to have a spot on Advent TV 246, feel free to contact us through our channel or via the WhatsApp number that will be displayed throughout this episode. Now, for the moment we've all been waiting for, let's just bow our head for a word of prayer. Our Father who art in heaven, as we proceed throughout with this evening's proceeding, may your Holy Spirit be with us and bless us and continue to keep watch and protect us. In Jesus' name, amen. It is my pleasure to introduce to you our guest today, Dr. Patricia Hudson-Henry. Dr. Patricia Hudson-Henry is a Trinidadian by birth. She has a great love for humanity, answering God's call on her life to help people has led her along the path that she has taken. She graduated from the American School of Professional Psychology with a doctorate in clinical psychologist with an emphasis on neuropsychology. She is the founder of Neuroscience Associates of Bowie. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Doctor. Maryland, and Restore Your Royalty, a program which helps women and girls to learn God's calling on their lives. A former secondary school teacher in the Seventh-day Adventist system in Trinidad, Dr. Hudson-Henry is an adjunct professor at the Washington Adventist University. She is an author and a poet. Her family is her greatest treasure. She is a wife and a mother of 3 beautiful children. Welcome, sister. Have I missed anything?
That is sufficient. Thank you so much for the warm welcome.
today we are today we have a very interesting topic, COVID-19 food for thought. When I hear food for thought, I think of all of the information that is needed for a time like this. We have uh, a very interesting discussion lined up for you guys this afternoon. Dr. Henry, if I may, how has the COVID-19 experience affected you, and what aspect of your life has it affected the most? What are some of the things you took for granted before uh, this pandemic?
Well, let me say that when the shutdown first took place, I was really excited for the free time because it allowed me to spend time with my family, to increase my devotional time. And it also created many opportunities for me professionally. This is a good example of that, being able to extend myself even though I can't leave my home. It provided many opportunities for me to work with individuals like in this capacity. Uh, with regards to my life and the area that has been most affected, I think it is uh, my psychological safety, I want to say. And I say this because right now we don't see the great impact of this situation that we're in. But the COVID-19 has placed us in a very, very precarious situation. And when I speak of psychological safety, I'm looking at areas like the dependability. There's so much that we don't know that we can't really depend on because our governments, they're struggling to find meaning. Another area when we speak of psychological safety is also structure and clarity. Even though I can provide structure and clarity within my home, there's a greater need for it as a community. Excuse me, the world in itself. This pandemic has placed us in one group of individuals who are struggling to find structure and clarity and meaning because we don't know what the impact is. And so, from a humanitarian perspective, this is something that is quite difficult for me because as a clinician, I can see how the impact of this isolation, this separation from our communities could have a great negative impact in the long run, especially when we think about the economic and psychological well-being of the world as a whole.
Okay. Um, I asked myself this the same question, and one of the I say my life is simple. I go to work, I come home, and sometimes the wife and I go for a drive and grab some ice cream, right? Um, but most of the times we are home, right? The freedom to get in the car and go for that drive, and do something spontaneous is what I took for granted. Let me give you an example. The beach is there. The wife would ask us to go to the beach, and I would keep putting it off. And now when I do feel like going to the beach, we can't go because of the curfew, right? So it goes to show that there's so many simple and small things that you would do, like just go and do, that you can't do now is really affecting us, so to speak, because of this virus. Um, yeah, one of the things that do have me confused though, or had me confused for a while, was the different terms that keep popping up as the virus intensified after it was discovered late last year. Well, rediscovered late last year. As a psychologist, your primary function is to deal with people on a daily basis, and more so their emotions. Is it safe to say that you know brains? Why I say that? Right, help me out. Have we all have these terms thrown at us outbreak since the outbreak of the coronavirus: social distancing, physical distancing, self isolation, quarantine, and so on. What do all of these terms really mean?
Interesting question. I love your segue. I would love to be on the beach myself right now. So again, there are many, many terms. First, let me clarify something. The World Health Organization initially used the term social distancing, and I guess the impact of that suggested that we should not socialize. And so what they're doing right now is they have moved away from the term social distancing and have embraced physical distancing. The difference being, while social distancing implies a lack of social interaction, physical distancing is saying, let's keep at least 6 feet away from each other so that we minimize the possibility of contact and thus spreading the virus. And that physical contact is not implying the lack of socialization, because initially everything is novel. You know, we've never had this situation in the world before. So the term social distancing surfaced and was embraced. But it's something we want to separate ourselves from, because even though we are on a lockdown and we are held up in our homes, we still want to make sure that we engage in some type of socialization, whether it's by Zoom or WhatsApp or FaceTime, engage in some type of social distancing so that we reduce the possibility of becoming depressed or anxious. So that's social distancing and physical distancing. The quarantine and another is another term that has been used, and the quarantine normally refers to an individual who already has been infected by a virus, and so that person is being kept isolated from other individuals so as to prevent the spread. And I think the last phrase or term you asked was, remind me. I did physical distancing, social distancing, quarantine. Is there another one?
Self-isolation. I think
self-isolation. No, that is. I love that. I love that you asked that question, because it allows me to introduce the brain, which I love. So self-isolation, isolation in itself is separating oneself from interacting with other individuals. In fact, within prisons, you have isolation that is used as a form of punishment. And so we want to make sure that we limit self-isolation, because self-isolation conjures up the thought of being separated from individuals and having minimal contact, not by choice, but through an imposition by an authority. So the self-isolation would be an individual who may have a virus within a family setting and maybe would have to remain in the basement or in a bedroom until they have recovered sufficiently. So I just want to make sure I throw that out there with regard to self-isolation, because it does have a negative impact on the brain. If the isolation is over a very long period of time, we can see that the part of the brain that is responsible for learning and memory tends to be impacted. It becomes smaller. That's the hippocampus. So that will happen over a long period of time, not in the immediacy like right now. But if we were held in this situation for a long time, we would find that the impact, actually the structure of the brain will change, and as a result, the way we behave and the way we interact with the world would also change.
Something else that I have noticed happening a lot, and it's not only recently with the virus and the outbreak, but it happened before. For example, during hurricane season, when we would hear of a tropical hurricane that's approaching the island, you got everybody panicking, goes into a panic, and they run to the supermarket, run to the gas station, fill up on this, fill up on that, and do all these different things that that we humans do when we panic. But panicking is something that seems not to be avoidable. Why the first thing that, we do is panic when we get bad news, and what goes into our brain, what goes on in our brain when we do? What are some of the things we should do first, after receiving bad news or receiving this information that kind of puts us into a panic mode? In other words, what should we do to avoid a panic attack, so to speak?
Well, first of all, let me make sure that your listeners understand the idea of a panic attack. A panic attack is really surfaces when you have an emotional overload based on something that is happening within your environment, where you feel as though you have no control. And so you have, it's a very intense feeling of fear. And you're in a situation where my patients have expressed feeling as if they are going to die. So it's a very intense feeling of fear. And so you panic and you get into fear. And so your body tries to get a measure of equilibrium. So your brain either places you in one of two positions. It either makes you want to run. You have the fear and flight mode that you go into. You're either going to run to get away from it, or you're going to stand up and fight. In the instance with our current situation, we were afraid, and of course we ran to the store to get all the things we needed to make sure that we can get a measure of safety, and we can have an ability to at least predict how we can take care of ourselves within the next few weeks. So that panic is actually our body responding to a situation where we feel we have no control. Now, how do we manage that? If you feel that, you would know, because our body responds in a particular way. We begin to sweat, our pupils dilate, our heart begins to race. And so you have that immediate physiological response. There are a couple of things that you can do to manage that, the panic attack, to reduce it. One thing you can do is you can engage in diaphragmatic breathing. You can engage in diaphragmatic breathing, which is taking really, really deep breaths. And it's a 6-2-6 module, which will help people remember how they can help themselves in that situation. And I say 6-2-6 is because we breathe in through our nostrils for like 6 seconds, and we hold it for 2 seconds, and then we breathe out slowly through our mouths, slowly for 6 seconds. What that does is it adjusts your heart rate and reduces it, which helps you to get yourself back into equilibrium. So that's one thing you can do to help reduce the fear, because you're actually adjusting the way your body is responding. Another thing you can do is when you receive bad news, is to consider the authenticity of the news. Sometimes we go from 0 to 100 without even considering what the news means and how it can impact our lives. Because not every piece of bad news has a direct impact on us personally. So we need to make sure that we minimize the amount of time that we spend online, in the type of news sources that we have. Psychologists have come up with this phrase over the last few years called headline stress disorder. It isn't a formalized diagnosis, but they coined this term because people spend so much time online looking at headlines that they become very stressful by just looking at it. So one of the ways to even minimize the panic and the fear we have is by limiting the amount of time we spend in environments and with people who would cause us to go into panic and become fearful, because their conversations tend to center around things that they have no control over. If you can manage things, then your panics would be much reduced. And if you're in an environment where you're constantly exposed to that type of information, then we want to separate ourselves from those situations and those individuals.
Okay. And over we have a question from our audience. It says, "What are some of the ways panic attack manifests itself?"
So the first thing you may have is an accelerated heart rate. Your heart begins to race. You will feel out of control. Your hands may get clammy. You may find yourself going into a catatonic state, which means that you might feel as if you can't move. That's another way that you can tell your body is going into a panic attack. And intense fear, a sense as if you have no control of what is happening.
Okay. So remember, guys, you can send your questions and your comments to us so that we can have those questions answered or those comments shared with the other viewers as we continue throughout this program. Remember, you're listening to Straight Talk 2020, and we are sitting with Dr. Hudson-Henry under the topic COVID-19, food for thought. And as we move along swiftly, oh, by the way, Doctor, I was tuned into your presentation earlier this week on your 10 tips of staying busy, I would say, during this crisis, well, this pandemic. You had some very, very, very good information. One of the things that myself and my wife that do, we have this Ludo game that we downloaded from the App Store that allows us to play not only amongst ourselves but with our other family members. And so we would share a game, and then we would play a couple of games every now and then, and keep ourselves, connected in that form of way. We also do joint worship at night with some of our other family members via WhatsApp. So and we all participate that way. And there's a few other apps out there that we're exploring, but you have an app. I think it was Plant Virtual. Can you share a bit of information with us?
So I was saying that to help me ensure that I drink sufficient water to keep my body healthy, because our body is 70% water, is I downloaded an app. It's called Plant Nanny, and it calculates the amount of water you need based on your age and your weight. And so it sends you reminders every day. And it's wonderful because I don't know if you can see it, like I can.
Yeah.
So you have a plant that is growing, and my plant looks as if it's dying because I haven't had enough water today. So when I drink a glass of water, it actually, makes my plant look a little healthier. So this is it's a good way to keep yourself hydrated in a fun way, and also grow some plants, because it actually is a fun app.
Okay, thank you very much for answering the question and for even being here with us today.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
Yeah. So while you're at home listening to your local government for information and instructions, and you find yourself and you find different ways to cope at home, remember to include in your routine some Bible time, and you can always send your biblical questions to us via WhatsApp, and we will surely give you an answer on the following episode. With that, I had a question for you. Where is it? Okay. Well, we'll pause a minute for some, while we receive some more questions or comments on WhatsApp, and I will give you this opportunity to share any other information that is, that you think that everyone should know apart from what we've been given before?
Well, I think one of the big things that we seem to forget is the significance of being together. I know that within my home, I relish the thought of spending time with my family, but I do know that there are many environments where the home environment is one that has been disrupted by COVID-19 in the sense that individuals no longer have the freedom to escape from home. This is significant because most times when we think of home, we think of a peaceful environment. However, there are some homes where peace comes when one is allowed to leave. And so this is significant because my fear and what I know will eventually be brought to light is the increase in things like domestic violence. And I suspect that individuals who may have had the opportunity to leave home may do so in an order to find peace and thus expose themselves to the virus by trying to escape from home. So there is a lot of emotional turbulence in some homes because individuals are now close to each other and can't escape from each other. And there may be friction that may arise. And so this is something that is really, really significant for me as a clinician, because I know that each person may have issues that they struggle with. And if there's not a way to escape and we are homebound, we can have a lot of negative repercussions.
Okay. I want to shift gears a little bit. Neuroscience, where is it? Above. The company that you have started, can you share some insight onto what exactly you guys do there?
So a Neuroscience Associate of Bowie was established to provide therapeutic support for children, adults, and older adults. And I separate those three because older adults tend to have a different need from those individuals like us who are within the mid-range of being adults. The other part, apart from therapy, we also provide assessment work, which we use to help individuals assess mental disorders and to support families with children who may be suffering from learning disabilities like ADHD, dyslexia, dyscalculia, and providing support for families on a whole. So we look at therapy and we look at assessment and how we can help individuals function in a range that helps them to live a more optimal life. And so that's it in a gist, what Neuroscience Associate of Bowie was established for.
Yeah. I heard you mention kids with ADHD. Now, in a time like this where some parent would use, will probably try to calm the child down by going for a walk or going on the outside. How has the virus affected children with ADHD from an environmental perspective?
Well, children who have ADHD, attention deficit hyperactive disorder, let me first make sure I clear that up for your listeners. It's a disorder that affects the executive functioning of the individual. The frontal lobe is not developed and functioning as it should. So individuals struggle with paying attention or attending to things, and also with being able to sit still. And so one of the misnomers with regards to attention deficit disorder is that they believe that the children cannot focus. They can focus very well. It's just that they focus on the things that they want to focus on because they're so easily distracted. So a child in a home who, and of course you have three that diagnosis is actually three different things altogether. One, you have the child who cannot focus, that's the attention deficit. You have the child who cannot sit or cannot sit still, is fidgety. And then you have the combined presentation of that diagnosis where the individual will have both the hyperactivity and the deficit with attention. Knowing that a child would have those have that diagnosis and being confined in a space, the family would have to make sure that there is a structured environment for that child. Children crave structure and they flourish best when they're in a structured environment. For a child who has ADHD, that structured environment should include a measure of free time for that child to be able to get all the, what we refer to, all the kinks out. That child should not be confined to sitting, but should be engaged in activities that allow them to run around if they have to. And even though they have that freedom, those activities can be structured. It could be a game of hide and seek. It could be a game of tag in the backyard. If you don't have a backyard to run to be free in, then you can engage the child in some type of fun exercise activity. But the parents would have to find some way of having that child be engaged in activity to help them, because it become a very stressful environment for him or her if they have to sit still. Now, if a child is on medication, quite often during the summer, psychiatrists would suggest a psychiatric vacation, in that they allow the child, because the child's brain is still developing and we don't want children to be on medication unnecessarily. So this COVID period may be a wonderful time for children who are actually medicated, children with ADHD who are medicated, to actually be taken off of their medication, which may be a bit rough for their parents, but it would be good for their brain to get that break as well.
Okay.
I should say one more thing with regards to the children who have ADHD. Parents, I know we might be inclined to provide lots of snacking. And so for children who, for us all, but for these children specifically, making sure that they have less refined foods and less sugar on a whole, that would increase the symptomatology, the running around and being overly active.
Yeah, okay. It's a lot of information to process. Now, what if someone wanted to get in contact with you or with the company Neuroscience of Bowie? How can they do so?
You can contact me directly through my email, Dr. Hudson-Henry at gmail.com. It's Dr. Hudson, HUDSON HENRY @gmail.com. Dr. Hudson-Henry at gmail.com. It's the email my information is filtered through to. And you can also reach me on my Instagram. I have my Instagram account is for my Restore Your Royalty, but I access that on a daily basis as well. So you can reach me via email or via Instagram, and I'll be happy to respond. I after being in Barbados and Dominica and Trinidad last summer, when I returned, I have maintained my support for some women there, and so I still support women via telephone. So if there are individuals who would want to speak with me, I'll be happy to do so if they reach out to me through those two mediums: email at drhudsonhenry at gmail.com or via my Instagram account.
Okay. We have another question here. What can we do to keep children attention on what they are working on? I guess this pertaining to with a lot of virtual schooling going on now, and the atmosphere of being at school and being at home kind of is different. So when you're at home, you're more relaxed than when you're at school in a more professional environment. what can we do to keep children's attention on what they're working on?
I find that children as well as adults function best when they are informed. Um, Information is key. So I would suggest that parents meet with their children. And sometimes we tend to overlook the fact that children are complete, whole human beings. And we need to honor that and respect it. I know it's hard for us Caribbean folks to hear that, but they are whole human beings, and engage them in that conversation. So I would meet with the children, children, and let them know, explain to them, listen, we have to be at home, and so this is what we want to do. I engage them. You want to get buy-in, and to get buy-in, you want them to contribute. So I would establish a schedule, and I would have things on the schedule that are immovable. In other words, these things must happen. So I would say, okay, we must have devotions in the morning. The breakfast is this time, lunch is this time, dinner is this time, okay? And so, of course, they're happy for that because all kids love to eat. Then I would include the academic piece, and I would leave a space also for fun activities. Make sure that there are breaks in between. If a child has an assignment, I would break that assignment up in small pieces. Reason being, even though in school they may be able to sit and complete an assignment, in school they're in a learning environment with a teacher who is trained. At home, they're with a parent who may be doing 3 or 4 different things, and there may be 2 or 3 other children. So every time you approach an assignment, I would break that assignment up into small pieces and let them know, okay, you're going to work for 15 minutes and then have a break of 5. Another 15 minutes and a break of 5. And I would probably use a timer. So the children would know when their break is coming and when that assignment starts again. In that way, the day is structured. They know what to expect. Their days are predictable. And it's also fun because they had a chance to contribute to the schedule and have places where they actually have freedom to do whatever they like with regards to playing and enjoying their time at home.
Okay. We have some more questions coming in from our WhatsApp. Another question: how do you deal with the drama that may come from with close quarters?
Very interesting question. So we have to acknowledge that even healthy relationships can become rocky during quarantine, because the truth is, in our daily life, we get up, we have a rush schedule in the morning, people go off to work, we have that break from each other, we come back home and we're happy to see each other. But during the quarantine, we do not have an outlet, whether it is work or a fun activity. We are all at home. So then you also have people in the relationships who crave social engagement. And so if you're a person who's a sociable person who wants to always be out and engage with other people, this prolonged time together could also cause friction in small spaces because you don't have the freedom to be the way you want to be. So what can we do? Well, the first thing I would say is that if you have any type of drama that, as the person described it, that surfaces, those things need to be addressed immediately. When you leave things to fester, they become, when you leave things unaddressed, they tend to fester. And what happens is you may have a little disagreement, which may result in a huge emotional, turbulent argument because it wasn't addressed. So the first thing we do is that we address these things early. In fact, and when I say address, I don't mean addressing it in front of everyone. If there is some type of discord in the home, find a quiet place that you can speak to the individual, okay? Find a quiet place, find a time, schedule a time where you have sufficient time to talk. Do not ask the person to speak to them just before lunch or just before something is going to happen. So meet with them privately. Make sure you're undisturbed, with the telephone and those type of things. The next thing you want to do is you want to be open and honest. The worst thing to do is to have a discussion about something that is disturbing to you, and by not being honest and expressing how you feel. Now, when I say being honest, honesty doesn't mean that you have to be nasty. You don't have to be brutal. There are many, many ways to express this pleasure without hurting another person's feelings. So you're discussing the issues at hand, and you're trying to come to some type of resolution. If this is done in an amicable way, you reduce the possibility of having prolonged disagreements. The other thing is, once you would have discussed your disagreements or the things that might have caused discord in the home and that might have disrupted the equilibrium in the home, what you would want to do is to now set boundaries. And so now I know what you don't like, and now I know that you prefer this particular thing, and now you are aware of my areas of concern. Then we can set boundaries. Okay, you don't like this done this way, let's set boundaries. I'm going to respect your boundaries and you respect my boundaries, because we are now forced to live in this small place together. The final thing I would say is that if all fail, then it might be possible that you may have to engage a third party. I would say engage a third party only if all else fail between the two individuals trying to resolve their discord. And make sure the third party you engage is someone who you can trust. Could be a family member or someone who will mediate fairly, and someone who has both your best interests at heart. And if that's not a family member and you have to go to a third party outside of the family, my suggestion would always be to seek professional help, because you're talking about confidentiality and also with the individual's competence to work through the differences that may arise in the discord.
Doctor, how do we? This is going to be a long haul for us, this whole pandemic situation, because I mean, at first we would be able to, if something is happening for a short space of time, we're able to adjust our life to suit. But then to have to adjust our lives for a long period may cause some sort of hiccup.
Yes, absolutely. In fact, what research shows with regards to isolation when we are in this type of situation is that our brain responds the same way that we responded. When we had the initial news of the shutdown, we all ran out to get the things we needed and came home, and for the first few weeks we were okay. And after that, now that this lengthy time begins to set in, now we don't know how, we're in a quandary. We don't know how to do this because we've never had to do it before. And what research shows is that in long-term cases of isolation, the brain responds the same way, in that when you have the isolation and you have that dread feeling, your neurons actually, the dendrites tend to branch out more. It's almost like a coping mechanism to help you, find meaning. And then when the time stretches out longer, what happens is that those dendrites that were growing out, they begin to recede and they begin to get shorter. And so over a long period of time, research has shown that people who have been in solitary confinement, the part of their brain that's responsible for spatial orientation, like directions, and for learning and memory, it becomes smaller. And when they are released into society, sometimes they have difficulties even identifying faces and being lost on a simple street. So even though we might not see the impact of the huge impact of this isolation right now, my belief is that for years to come, we will begin to see the impact unfolding, not just emotionally and psychologically, but also with regards to the economics. Families not knowing how to provide for their loved ones, families having to deal with the loss of loved ones, families with children who may be orphaned. And so the impact of COVID-19 is not just in the immediate, can I get a loaf of bread? It's actually, it's going to be for years to come when we see the ripple effect that it has had on our brains and our functioning.
Okay. And I guess adjusting to these new routines that not inside your home, but also outside, like things like dealing with going to the supermarket or going to the gas station or going to these various places where you have to then in some cases wait in lines for hours. Like for example, our supermarket structure is in a way where we go alphabetically based on your last name, and I am in one of the larger groups. For us here in Barbados, it's for A and B, it's Monday morning and Friday afternoon. But I mean, if there's so many people with the last name A and B, that short hours is not going to work. How can we really deal with that kind of situation? Because then when we fight, okay, you have a couple hours and you've been in a line all morning and time is almost running out and you're nowhere near the door. You may have to go back home without getting what you went for. And after doing that for a couple of times, it can really play with one's psyche.
Yes, I totally agree with you. I have, as I said, it's a pandemic, so we're all in the same boat because we've had the same similar experience going to the grocery and thinking you're going early, and when you go, there's already a long line. What I have found, what the system that we have come, because this is all novel, it's novel, so it's new for all of us. And so what we do in our home is that we work with my sister-in-law. Apart from the initial groceries that we purchase ourselves, if they're going to the store or to the supermarket or to Target, they let us know and they would pick up stuff for us. And when we are going, we do the same. We drop it at their home. So one thing that, because we're all learning, is that maybe if we can support each other that way, by, picking up groceries for each other, even though your name may begin with C and I might be A, maybe I can help you by picking some things up. So we can probably find, excuse me, find creative ways to support each other with doing that, and probably even resort to ordering, if it's possible, ordering food rather than going to the groceries. I'm not sure how the system works in Barbados. That's another option, but I do understand the stress, how stressful it can be being in this environment. And I don't know how much time we have because I thought of something. I don't know how much more time we have.
We have a couple more minutes. You can go ahead and finish your point.
I was going to say that we have to be also careful because beyond the grocery, that's just that's a symptom. The big concern is the stress that it causes. And so being fatigued and tired in the line, that's one thing. But there's a particular theory in psychology, it's called the diathesis theory. And what it says is that when an individual is placed under undue stress, like what we're having right now, individuals who have a genetic predisposition for mental illness or physical illness, the stress can cause those disorders to develop and those illnesses. So what's going to happen is that just because we're in a stressful environment, we're going to find that people are going to become ill. They will develop illnesses, physical and mental illnesses, because they're under so much stress. And as Christians, it is our responsibility, part of our responsibility, based on the Great Commission given to us in Matthew chapter 28, that we are to really to evangelize. And in this case, we are taking the good news, and the good news being, I am present to help you. And so we can reach out to each other, call someone and see how they're doing, connect with an old person, a person who is single, call your neighbor out from the window, reach out to people, because it's one of the ways that we can help heal and support each other during a very unsettling time that we're in right now.
Okay. So as we wrap up, there was a question I wanted to ask you earlier, because you're not only a psychologist, but you're also a sister in Christ. I wanted to ask you, how can we find comfort in the Bible in a time like this?
So for me, I like to think of three things. Whenever someone approaches me with regards to God and something is happening, I ask them three questions. Number one is, do you believe in God? Yes, you do believe in God. Do you believe that He is omniscient, omnipresent, right?
Yeah.
And omnipotent? Yes, so He's everywhere. He is all powerful and He's all knowing. And do you believe that He loves you? Yes. So if I answer yes to those three questions, then I know that God has His eyes on me. Then I know that He has a plan for my life. Then I know that He is present with me. We are told, we are reminded that He is present with us in, this is Hebrew. I think it's Hebrews 13, chapter 5, that He will always be with us. And so God has a plan for us. And so this is how I get comfort. I get comfort in acknowledging that my Father is the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. I get comfort in knowing that He has a plan for my life. I get comfort in knowing that beside COVID-19, that He still has a plan for me, that COVID-19 is not going to toss up and turn the plan God has for me, because He is still in control. And I know that we are told in Exodus chapter 14 and verse 13, we've been told that we need to stand firm and see the salvation of the Lord. So in times like these, we need to go back and trust the promises that God has made in His word, know that we are indeed the apple of His eyes, and that His eyes are forever on us. He has a plan for us, and He's never going to leave us or forsake us. And that's where I get my comfort, being a child of the King and an heir to so much.
Yeah. Once again, I must say thank you very much for joining us on this episode. The information that you've provided for us is beneficial. One of the last point before we go, developing a routine for those of us who are home is a good thing now. Some of the things to include in our routine are rest time, and I would say some form of worship time as well. What are some of the other things that we can include in our routine for those of us who have children, or even for those of us that's just a two-person family?
So apart from rest and work, make sure that you have a time to engage in some type of fun, enjoyable activity that is good for both of you, not just one. I would also suggest that you make your schedule flexible. Have something flexible in there, because if you do the same mundane thing every time, then that's not good for your brain. So you need to make some changes. You may have the same schedule, but you can move some things around sometimes to have some flexibility in there for your own sanity, just sanity, instead of doing the same thing over and over again. I always tell my patients, this has nothing to do with your hygiene, but one thing that really gets your day going is by making sure you get up in the morning and you take a good shower, because it invigorates your body. So there are things that you can add to your day, like possibly even starting a new passion, like a new hobby, or reigniting something that you enjoyed in the past and that you have stopped. So find things to fill your day that brings meaning to your day, because this is a time like no other. We will never have a period of time like this again, where we have been given so much freedom with regards to how we spend our time.
Okay. That's it for this episode of Straight Talk 2020. Any final comments before we take a leave?
Well, let me say thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to once again to share and hopefully be a blessing to other people. I believe it's my calling. I think we should all try to support each other and be present, especially during this COVID-19 lockdown period. And my last word being, trust God. Let's stand on his promises and allow him to do what he has promised to do as our God and our King.